Akshay is a rising sophomore at Purdue University studying engineering management with a minor in design. He is passionate about UX design and marketing and is currently the co-founder and CMO at Ponder, a product analytics startup helping companies build better products through utilizing their customer feedback. His startup is currently working with Microsoft to deliver its solution to businesses around the world. Akshay started his design journey back in high school, where he became an avid graphic designer who combined his love for sports and art, amassing close to 10K followers on his Instagram, and working with top athletes in the NBA, NFL, and FIBA. With a background in graphic design, Akshay wanted to further explore the intersection of technology and design and fell in love with UX design and its user-centered approach. He's now working full-time with the startup team and designing Ponder's analytics platform. Outside of work, Akshay enjoys playing basketball, photography, spending time with friends, and hiking. So we're excited to hear you share your knowledge with us.
All right. Yeah, thank you so much, Shreya. I really appreciate that. So yeah, this is actually kind of like the second virtual workshop I've taught. So yeah, I'm still also figuring things out, all this virtual stuff. So, but I'm really excited to get started. Hopefully you guys will learn a lot. I know we have about like an hour and a half, so things will go by pretty quick, but I'm going to try to make this fun as well. I've planned about 3 different activities. So just if you guys want to prepare, if you can have a notebook handy and a pencil, that'll be good. You're not taking notes, don't worry. You'll have to draw a lot of things later on. So just have that handy. And also, if you do have Adobe XD downloaded, feel free to open that as well. And yeah, if you guys are ready, then I'll get started. I'll also share my screen. Yeah, could you enable screen sharing?
It's enabled now.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, at any point, let me know if you can't see my screen because I know it glitches sometimes. So can you guys see this?
Yep, we can see it.
All right, cool. So yeah, let's get started. So for the objectives of this workshop, I really want to cover like maybe 4 or 5 different things. We'll see how much time we have. But I want to walk you through, guys, the basics of prototyping software. So I know UX design is a pretty big field, but actually what software do you use to do all these designs? And it's different from what you've heard previously. I know a lot of people know about Figma. There's also Adobe XD. So I'll be kind of covering both of those programs today and also giving a live demonstration as to what Adobe XD actually is, because that's the platform I'm most comfortable with. I'll also be talking about the fundamentals of functional UI design, understanding your target audience, which will be the main focus of this workshop because you have to design around your users in order to be effective. And also some examples of good design versus bad design. And just in general, you kind of develop this design thinking mindset that you can actually apply to many different fields, whether it's design, programming, or anything you're interested in. And then we'll also be sketching wireframes today. So yeah, this is just the agenda, which I'll be covering, as I mentioned before. And yeah, again, just a little bit about me. I'll be a sophomore at Purdue University. So I'm actually leaving next Friday for Purdue. So this is kind of my last week here. I'm the co-founder and CMO at Ponder, which I'll explain kind of what we do in our next slide. I'm the founder of AKM Studios, which is essentially a design and marketing company, which I founded back in 2016 while I was in high school. And since then, I've been able to kind of grow my audience and work with many different athletes in the NBA and NFL, including Kevin Garnett, James Conner, and many other NFL players. And essentially, I was focusing more on sports design and sports media design. And then I'm actually an aspiring product designer, so I handle all the product design stuff for my startup. And my focus is mainly in entrepreneurship branding as well as graphic design. So my startup Ponder is essentially a feedback and analytics platform, which helps companies build better products. So basically at the start of October last year, we kind of realized this problem of a lot of like fake reviews on Amazon and really bad feedback that customers are receiving. So what our platform does is basically give companies this really in-depth visualization into their customer feedback. So that's kind of what we're working on right now. And we're recently partnered with Microsoft actually to get our solution out there. So that's been a really cool opportunity for us. And this picture on the right here is kind of my team right now, minus like 3 people. They're kind of overseas. But it's been really fun. We moved into a house together this summer and we've been working full time on our startup. So that's kind of where I've been at. So yeah, my role in general though is I'm creating the user experience from start to finish. So for our platform, I basically figure out who's our users, what they need to accomplish, and then I do lots of sketching, lots of diagramming, and then put that stuff into Adobe XD and kind of create the wireframes for our developers to actually use my designs to create the actual code from it. So one thing you'll learn from this workshop is how to create effective designs. So when you're working in a team, your developers will have an easier time of implementing them, because what a lot of people do is they create all these nice looking designs, but then the developers are kind of having a nightmare because it just looks really good, but it's not functional. And then one of the main roles I have is constantly iterating to improve the experience and build around our users. So we'll get started with kind of the basics of prototyping software. So there are essentially two main softwares that people use in today's industry. There's also the third one, which is Sketch, which is kind of the original one for Mac. But a lot of people do use Figma and Adobe XD. So Adobe XD is basically the industry standard for Adobe. It's the Creative Cloud application. So if you guys use Photoshop before, Illustrator, it's in that same family. But Adobe XD is used to prototype, model, and create wireframes of different products. You can do mobile, you can do web, you can do so many different things with it. It's used by UX and UI designers to prototype and basically lay out what they want to design. It's kind of their vision before they hand it off to their technical team. And it's basically really easy to resize, create, and manipulate different components. So this is really easy to use software, and you can kind of get a hang of it in this workshop. And this is real world skills you're learning for if you want to kind of work on your own startup one day, or even work at a company like Amazon, Microsoft. If you want to get into those design roles, it's really important you learn these. I know Amazon especially uses Figma for their development. So it's a really good skill to learn, like how you learn programming like Java, Python. A design software should be one of them you should learn as well. And also this can be used for presentations. So if you're presenting to investors, for example, this would be a great time to actually showcase your prototype. So this is what Adobe XD actually looks like. As you can see here, this is an example of a mobile application for like a hiking kind of app. And you can see there's a lot of different tools here. You can connect different screens together. And I'll explain a little bit more about what these mean. But essentially, these are called artboards right here. And you can actually link things together to create an interactive prototype, which I'll explain later on. And yeah, this is just your tools panel right here. And if you guys actually want to open XD on your computer and just like kind of look around it while I'm explaining these slides, that'll help you understand it a little bit more. But yeah, once you open XD, you'll kind of have this blank interface, and feel free to select one of the different templates. So that's one of them. This is just another example of what a prototyping screen looks like in Adobe XD. And now using the actual application, basically Adobe offers pre-made UI kits. So if you do go onto the Adobe XD website, you'll be able to download a lot of these pre-made UI kits, which designers from all around the world have created and uploaded to this public forum. And you'll be able to actually see how they've done it and kind of created their designs. And as you can see here on this right screenshot, right when you open Adobe XD, you'll see these icons right here, which represents the different sizings of your screen. So you can pick mobile application, iPad, web, and custom size. For now, I will actually explain what to do, and you guys can get started with that. And as you get more, I guess, acquainted with Adobe XD, as you guys get acquainted more with Adobe XD, you'll be able to use keyboard commands and kind of optimize efficiency, because your main goal is to create designs in the least amount of time and be very efficient in the process. So there's also very simple and easy to follow tutorials online. So learning about this prototyping software is pretty easy. So now let me actually open XD and show you guys. Can you guys still see my screen?
Yep. Yep.
All right, awesome. So I'll actually go from scratch. So if you guys open Adobe XD and click on here, this small caret here, I usually like to design with the iPhone 12 Pro Max, but as new phone sizes come out, Adobe XD does kind of update with the new phone sizes. So click on iPhone 12 Pro Max, and you will get brought up with this. Now, this is just a blank screen with your artboard created, and this are your basic tools right here. So anytime you want to create an artboard, you can duplicate it, and I'll show you how to do that as well. But yeah, so these are your basic tools. So on your left-hand side here, you have your square, circle, triangle, your line tool, your pen tool, your text, which will all come in handy. And if you want to duplicate your screen, you can click on this. And I'm on a Mac right now, so you can click Alt and then click on it, and Alt Shift and click, and then you can just drag a new artboard. Or you can just, yeah, you can do that. You can also just press Control C and Control V, and you can duplicate a new artboard. So you can create multiple screens like this to lay out your artwork, and you can move it around by just clicking on it. So does anyone have any questions so far?
Someone asked if this is why websites look weird on mobile sometimes.
Yeah, so it's actually up to the developers. Yeah, but Adobe XD is solely a design platform, so there's no backend connectivity to WordPress, SQL. There's no backend connectivity to anything. So this is just solely for design. So what designers actually do is they create a mobile version of their they create a mobile viewport of their program, and then they also create a desktop version. So for example, I can create a new artboard over here. And basically, where is that? Hold on. Yeah, I can essentially create new artboards and put my mobile version on the side and put a mobile here, a phone and a desktop. And basically you can design both at the same time, and you send that off to developers and they'll be able to see, okay, on my desktop version, it needs to look like this, but on my mobile version, it needs to look like this. So I can actually show you guys kind of what some of the stuff I've been working on recently, which will kind of explain what I'm talking about.
Also, before you get into that, we have another question in the chat. It's from Elizabeth. She's asking, can you use this to build a website on WordPress?
Yeah, so you can definitely use this to build it on WordPress. So you can do the design here, but in terms of actually implementing it, you'll have to pick a WordPress theme or just manually code it. But this will give you a good indication as to what you're actually making. So right now for Ponder, actually, we are developing kind of a marketplace type of thing. So right now, this is solely for a desktop and solely for screens, and we're not developing a mobile app just yet. But for this, I can just kind of create, as you can see here, my artboard is pretty crazy and I have different flows going on. And it all started from these initial sketches, which you guys will be actually doing today. So it turned from initial sketches into what we call mockups, and then it turned into our actual website, which is currently live. So you can kind of see the progression as to how this works. And anytime your developer needs to make something, first prototype it in a design software and then implement it, because it saves them a lot of trouble later on. And you can kind of see here, just like the basic layouts and the different tools and things like that. So let me go to my basic artboard over here. And what Adobe XD is, it's also a prototyping software. Thank you so much. Yeah. Yeah, so for my website, we actually built it from scratch. So we used something called React.js, and we're hosting it kind of locally right now. And we're basically using Tailwind CSS and React.js for building our website. So if you guys actually want to kind of visit our website, I'll just leave the link right here. You can check it out. I recently got into front-end development, so actually working with the whole HTML and CSS thing. So I kind of learned that basically in a month because we needed a front-end dev to step in. So from these designs, I was actually able to implement it using code. So it was kind of a really cool experience in that. So you can check out the website. That's kind of our main website right now, but obviously you'll need to log in and stuff to access the platform. But yeah, that's just kind of how it is right now. But I'll show you guys kind of how to use XD a little bit later on. But first, it's important to cover just the basics of the program, as well as going into UX design as a whole. So does anyone have any questions as to kind of what XD looks like or what it is used for before we move on? All right. Yeah, so Adobe XD is the program you'll be using. And there's two main components to this. There is the design component, which means you can create multiple screens and basically create, edit, and scale components. So this is kind of laying out everything that your app will want to be. And there's also the prototype. So the design is everything you see. So it can be shadows, it can be the lines, it can be the color, so the images, so everything is related to that in terms of design. And then when you next step is prototyping. So prototyping is actually where you connect the screens. And as you can see here with this first image, you get all these different transitions here, like tap, transitions, exam, dissolve, etc. So if I actually go back to XD here, I can show you guys what that looks like. So give me 1 second. Yeah, there's quite a lot of stuff here. But yeah, the best way to learn about this is just to show you guys real life examples. And keep in mind, this project I'm showing you took about 4 months to make. So don't expect like, this is like a really final version of everything. But yeah, give it 1 second. Cool. So now this is the design side of everything. So this is actually a educational web application, which I designed with a few team members. But then when you get into prototyping, this is where it gets serious. So let me just show you guys this real quick. So yeah, this is exactly what happens when you create a user flow like this. So once you learn kind of the basics of design and basics of prototyping, you kind of get to this. So what these are actually nodes that connect these different screens together. And it'll allow you to actually create a quick animation as to what the screen is. So like, for example, if I play it from the beginning, you can get cool animations like this. I can click continue. I can fill in information like this, and you can kind of create an interactive application that will be great to present to other people to showcase what your product actually is. So I can click on different things here and things like that. So that's just kind of what the prototyping side of things look like. So now if I switch it back to the presentation, so you have your design and prototyping side. The other thing that's important in Adobe XD is to use grids. So the fundamental thing that all designers must learn how to do is using grids, because it ultimately helps align their content and their typography. So typography is actually the text that appears on the screen. So you have vertical and horizontal grids, and that essentially helps to organize containers and your design elements. So as you can see here in this first image right here, this is exactly what the grids look like in Adobe XD. You can have a column of 12 columns, a grid of 12 columns, which allows you to lay out your content. So if I go back to XD right here and I open my project, and then I click on the artboard here and click on layout, this is exactly what the grids look like. So as you can see here, I've designed practically all the content to stay between my grids. And when you're designing your mobile application, after we do your wireframes and then you actually use the program, you'll just have to consider, you'll have to make all of your content fit between these grids. So the standard grid layout is 12 grids, and it basically lines across your screen. And if you have a mobile application, the grids will be much smaller. Whereas if you're on a desktop, your grids will obviously be bigger than this. And this is obviously just to ensure that you have enough space on your left and right side, because I'm sure you guys have visited websites where you've been like, oh, like, I'm not sure why this text is like bleeding off the screen, or why can't I see this certain image? It's because it's not fundamentally designed for that platform. So it's really important to understand responsive design and how to cater your application or your website to fit on mobile as well as desktop. So as I scroll down here, you can see everything aligns between a 50 pixel gutter, which is the both left and right side. So there's a lot of measurement that goes into this, but don't worry too much about it, because XD really helps you to get that started. So yeah, you have two types of grids, which are called vertical grids and baseline grids. And you guys can feel free to take notes on this. I can also send out this PowerPoint later for like future reference, and you guys can use this whenever you're creating a new project for yourself. Yeah, exactly. So if you've received problems, for example, viewing a website on your tablet, it's because the developers didn't really understand which content is fitting on the screen itself. Exactly, yeah. So yeah, Esther, it seems like you've had quite a bit of experience with this, but yeah, a lot of times right now on our website, we've used a lot of things called flex boxes, which allow it to responsively adapt to what screen size is being shown. And it's really important to design for different platforms. So your vertical grids is what's shown here, and then baseline grids is essentially where all your typography should align to. So I just gave you guys a quick demonstration about Adobe XD. And now I will move into the main kind of topic of this workshop, which is kind of understanding your users and targeting their needs, because good design is nothing without your users and understanding your audience. So in general, what user experience actually is, it's a combination of psychology, science, and art. And user experience is right in the middle. When people think of like UI design, for example, they just think of solely art, or when they think of design in general, they solely think of art. But a lot of in the past decade, a lot of people who have actually had an experience with psychology, with the sciences, especially in like psychology majors, a lot of them have transitioned into the UX design space because a lot of those principles are applicable to users. So once you understand how a user feels and you understand how an application works, as well as the way it looks, then you'll be able to create a good user experience for your audience. So understanding these three main things will allow you to be successful. And this is the book I'm actually currently reading right now. If you guys are really interested in actually becoming a designer and maybe going into this as well as in college. So right now I'm actually an engineering major, but I'm minoring in design. If you guys are interested in pursuing any design related fields, I would suggest reading this book. It's called The Design of Everyday Things. And it really starts off with the basic bare bones of just looking at different products that you interact with on a daily basis and how they're made, and also examples of bad design. So this guy is actually a really amazing author. He's a designer himself and has helped thousands of clients around the world. And this is really a fundamental book that a lot of people should read if you are interested in this. And it's just really eye-opening to see how things are created, from industrial designing to mechanical, and this is basically applicable to every design field. So before we get started with going deeper into this, let's just actually define what experience design is. So experience design is focused, basically placed on the creativity and enjoyment of the user experience. It's what the user is feeling. Interaction design is basically enhancing the user's understanding of what can be done, what is happening, and what has occurred. So when a user clicks a button, when a user clicks a link on your mobile application, or when a user clicks an arrow, what is happening in the user's mind and what can be done after that. So there's a lot of different steps people have to take in order to do this, and you have to master both the experience design side of things as well as the interaction. And then what design as a whole is, it's just essentially how things work, how they're controlled, and basically the nature of interaction. So design in general is how everything is kind of placed and is working on the application, but really main focus here is experience design and interaction design. So does anyone have any questions about kind of those definitions? I know I'm going a little bit quick, but I wanted to get you guys in the activities. Cool. So yeah, before you understand and before you start designing, it's really important to understand your audience, because one thing all designers should understand is that you are not the audience. So if I'm designing an application, I need to make sure I'm talking to my users. I'm doing lots of research on them before I even start anything. And before I even open Adobe XD, I need to actually understand who my users are, because different audiences adapt to different styles of designs and different experiences. If you're tailoring an application towards kids, you're not going to put advanced navigation features or complex buttons. You want to make everything as simple as possible with maybe bold text, bold colors to really attract them in, but only keep it very simple layout. And where you place your button matters, and I'll get into that later on. And you also need to understand color theory and natural human behavior. So I'm sure in school, you guys have probably taken some art classes and you guys learned about color theory. Now, color theory really applies in this case, because depending on which audience you're targeting, you need to use certain greens, you need to use certain blues, you need to use purples. So depending on what type of application you're building, purple is more of creativity and kind of like imagination, and same with blue as well. So those are the type of colors you want to evoke when you're making something like that. But the fundamental thing that you guys should also write down is called market segmentation. So if you guys take a business class, you'll also learn about this. But this is basically defining the four main functionalities of an audience, which is the demographics, geographics, psychographics, and behavioral. And what demographics is basically like age, gender, race, like ethnicity, salary, those type of things. So it's kind of defining those basic things about an audience, which can really help shape your product. And then geographics is essentially where they live, kind of like what house do they live in, and things like that. And then psychographic is kind of what they believe in, what are their values, and what are kind of their habits. And then that's also digging deeper into behavioral, which is how do they live their day-to-day lifestyle? What do they think about a certain product? What are they currently using? And what do they think about a certain like purchasing decision, for example? So it's all of these things different that are combined. But in order to actually get this, you have to do a lot of research, whether that's conducting interviews with your audience, whether that's sending out surveys. You have to really understand your users before you get into the whole design aspect of this. And if you guys want to write this down, these are pretty important terms that will actually help you in your UX design journey. One of them is called analytical research. So analytical research is essentially defining your customer's purpose and creating a customer journey map. So this is essentially what their users' interactions would be, how the user is feeling, what their motivations are, and also any existing user data you have. So if you are let's see, if you're trying to build a kind of, let's say you're building an app to help people find nearby like sports courts near them to see what is open, you have to kind of define the demographics of who that is. So probably like young adults, teenagers. You have to describe what they're feeling and motivating. So one of their motivations is they want to find open basketball courts to play in on the weekends, but they can't. So you have to define different types of things like that and write it down. That's where you have to get started. And then anecdotal research is actually going out and conducting field research. So this is user interviews, supportive interviews. So asking friends, asking users exactly what they need, what they want, how they're feeling, and also customer surveys. So a lot of times this can be treated as spam, but you have to make sure you're actually kind of sending these out with the purpose and saying, maybe offering them compensation after. So a lot of times how user testing and focus groups are ran is there's a lot of compensation that's kind of given out to reward them with their time. So anecdotal research and analytical research are two of the key main things you need to understand in order to understand your customers better. And then once you understand those two, you enter a phase called design discovery. Now, what design discovery is you gather inspiration from all around you, from a multitude of sources. This can be going to your nearest art gallery. This could be looking on the internet. And this could be looking at and playing around with other apps. So for example, if I'm trying to create a social media platform, I can look at many of the competitors we have today: Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok. I'm sure you guys are pretty active on that as well. But looking at those type of design features and looking at those apps, you can draw a lot of inspiration because a lot of these big companies have already done so much research and put in lots of money into creating a good user experience. So drawing inspiration from other apps and kind of finding what are the pros and cons of every feature and implementing some of those into your app, that's also one way to do it. But this is called the design discovery phase, and you can practically get inspiration from all around you. You can even look at nature and get inspiration. So this is kind of what a lot of designers do. Sometimes they just sit down for like maybe an hour or two and just think about what they want to design. They look at different inspiration, like even sitting outside, and you can get a lot of information for that. And then in your design discovery, you enter the job stories phase, which is essentially taking the user's motivations and personas and discovering opportunities for the user. So for example, the user can, for example, going back to like finding open courts near you, the user can book a certain time to go to the court and invite friends. So that's one opportunity they have. Another opportunity could be they can while they're there, they can actually alert people around them saying, hey, we're in need of a game, we need 3 more players, feel free to come join. So those type of things. So once you understand your users, you can find new opportunities for them, and that will help you shape your audience. So yeah, feel free to write these down. These are pretty important terms which will allow you to actually understand your customers more. And this is one thing that's a key UX design component, which is creating customer journey maps. So what this is, it focuses on the conversation within the team and creates a mental model. So if you're working on a team, for example, you're at a company, you're at your startup, creating a customer journey map of what the customer actually encounters first and encounters at the end of your cycle, that'll be very important. So for example, when they first approach your app, what do they want to do? How will they do it? So first you can define, you define a scenario, you compare it with existing scenarios. You also negotiate, meaning how does the user decide whether to use another app or your app? And also it selects the different options. So basically, how does the user select to use a particular feature of your product? So this is an example of what a customer journey map looks like. It's a really basic one. It essentially just defines the customer profile and the scenario. For example, Jamie needs to switch her current mobile plan and she wants a plan that can save her money without having to sacrifice usage limits. So that's just a very basic scenario that Jamie needs to actually accomplish. But then you can kind of find out and study more users like Jamie and see how they go from step point A to point B. And you need to define those points along the way in order to actually create an effective application. So these are the different components, and it basically just allows you to discover more about your customers. So yeah, just a quick rundown as to what design discovery is. You're basically understanding the interests and wishes of your audience, the types of communication and the lifestyle they're living. For example, a person living in a New York City penthouse compared to like a rural area will have a different lifestyle. They'll have different methods of communication and they'll face a different problem. So you have to make sure you're catering your application and your product towards a particular audience and not to go too big, because if you're going too big and your scope is too large, you won't be able to focus certain features and your audience will get lost. So you need to make sure you're finding a particular audience to cater your product to. You also need to figure out how they're obtaining their current information. Are they using the internet most often? Are they using their mobile phones to search up things? Are they getting their information from newspapers, magazines, things like that, which will also get into the different age ranges and demographics. Another thing you need to really define is the values, beliefs, and behavior of your audience. So this goes back to the core values of every human, because every human has these type of things, and you need to define that. And this can only be done through user interviews, talking with your users, and getting as much feedback as possible. And you also need to understand as a designer, what are the current trends in the media and what is media talking about? So you need to be kind of up to date with things, because if an application looks outdated, it's not following like the current trends that a user wants. Like for example, social media apps like TikTok and Snapchat have to constantly adapt to what's changing today and basically make it more applicable to their audience. I know Snapchat just launched a new update with their like AR Bitmojis, which is an interesting feature, but it's not something you may need it, but it could possibly improve the user experience and your communication with friends. So that's one example as to how Snapchat really has defined their audience, which is basically teenagers, and how they kind of have to appeal to them. And also understanding gender and age, that's really important, especially the age aspect, because you have to cater your app and not include too many advanced features if the audience is younger and things like that. So does anyone have any questions about kind of the user defined stage and kind of the audience definition before we get into our activity? Feel free to ask any questions, because I know this can get a little bit complicated, especially when it gets to understand your users. So cool. So if everyone has a piece of like a notebook nearby, just let's take 10 minutes to define a customer profile. So now that you've kind of understood the different aspects that go into defining a customer, who your audience is, I can go back to the slides if you guys need to refer to that. This is a scenario that I've kind of generated. And so I kind of go to the gym pretty often. I know a lot of my friends do as well. And a lot of people are going this summer. So I thought a new health startup is looking to develop a mobile application that aims to track the calorie intake of an individual's meals and provide dietary suggestions based off their current habits, while keeping track of important health metrics such as their weight, their daily water intake, and their different macros. So what macros are is like how much protein you're consuming, how much carbohydrates, how much sugar, etc. So based off of this given scenario, just take 10 to 15 minutes or just 10 minutes to define who an ideal customer of this app would be. What are their different values and beliefs? What do they want to accomplish? And what are their motivations? So if you guys want to just take a picture of the slide just for reference, I can go back to the other slides so you guys can write it down. But yeah, let me go back to a few slides, and let me go back to this and just take 10 minutes to define a customer profile based off of this scenario. And let me know if you guys have any questions, but I will time 10 minutes. And then I'll ask a few volunteers to share what they've come up with. Also, can I get a thumbs up if the pace I'm going at is good? I hope you guys are not like too. I don't want to feel rushed or anything, but let me know if the pace is good and if you guys are kind of understanding where we're getting at with this workshop. Awesome, cool. Oh, I think I can also give you guys the link to the slides if you just link the slides here if you guys want to look at that. Okay, I'm sharing my screen. Can you guys hear this? I'm playing background music. I don't think you guys can hear it. Oh, okay, that's cool. All right, we have about 5 minutes left. 4 minutes now. think as detailed as you can about who your audience is, and this will really help shape the type of app you're creating. So once you get all of this research and your customer discovery out of the way, this will help you. Yes, thank you. This is kind of like designing vibes right here with the lo-fi music, so it helps. Yeah.
I thought that I was the
All right, you have about 2 minutes left. Yes, actually, I will leave some links at the end of this workshop, which you guys can look at. I know some of the courses are paid. I personally took what was it? I took a 3 or 4 month long course last summer, actually. I can send you the link of that. I'm not sure if they're still running it, but it was all virtual. But I'll send you the link after. But yeah, a lot of big companies like Google especially are putting out certification courses for this type of work. So if you do get those type of certificates, it'll really help you with your internship search and things like that. Yeah, that's the question I get a lot. It takes a long time to just kind of get situated with what the field is and everything like that. But in order just to where to begin, it just starts kind of with your creativity and just looking to other applications. And you know a little bit about Adobe XD now, so just playing around with it. So I can just pause the music just a little bit. But yeah, the way I kind of started actually was I didn't really take any formal lessons. I didn't like learn from a teacher or anything. I just kind of experimented with Adobe XD and looking at a lot of YouTube tutorials. So obviously, before you get into the UI design of things, you need to know a lot about the research and the UX that goes into it. So that's where I would start first, is understanding how to really research your users and how to get information from them and like collect data. And then I would look at going onto YouTube and actually looking at many different courses there, because that's kind of how I learned as well. And Adobe XD has a whole basically library of tutorials you can follow. So just playing around with how to create different applications, whether you're trying to create one for sports, a health app, maybe an environmental app, just whatever you want to create, what you think is necessary. You can even recreate existing apps. I think that's one of the best ways of learning. So for example, if you want to create like Spotify, for example, if you want to create a music streaming app, you can look at that. So you can look at Spotify, what they have now, and you can kind of just look at that and play around with how to put down the different shapes, how to put down the different buttons, and that'll get you learning. All right, so time is up. So hope everyone has finished. Would anyone like to share? Yeah, no problem. Would anyone like to share what they have as their defined customer profile? And if no one raises their hand, I will call on 3 people.
So I was thinking a defined customer would be someone who's maybe a college age student or a young professional. Could be anywhere between ages of 18 and 50 even, because people really care about their health care.
Yep.
Healthcare costs are very expensive, and the more you take care of yourself, the less expensive or the more money you save and the longer life you'll live.
Exactly.
sometimes because you're working so much, whether it's school or work or family stuff, you forget about, oh my gosh, have I consumed enough water today? They may not eat like a balanced meal because they're snacking on unhealthy things. So if there's an app to help them keep track of things, or maybe they're not knowledgeable in nutrition enough to realize what is healthy and unhealthy. They may not know that you should have whole grains versus like white flour, white rice, potatoes, that sort of thing, you know?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, so those are my thoughts. Like, I don't want to like subdivide it so much that like your customer is like, I can't say it's going to be like a 30-year-old mother and like, I don't want to leave it that like precise. I want it broader, you know, because I want more customers and everything too. So.
Yeah, no, that's a really good job in your customer profile. I think you went really in depth with that. And I would maybe consider adding a little bit more of like how they're thinking and more of their behavioral side of things, but you did great on the demographics, and maybe define also some geographics, if they have access to gyms, if they have access to like where they live, things like that. But yeah, great job. Thank you so much for sharing. And there is one question here about, can UX be dangerous when companies Amazon is taken? Oh, that is a very big question. I've never thought about it that way. But the reason why Amazon is very successful, actually, I will get to your question later because I do want to get the customer profiles, but yeah, that's a great thought. I'll answer that. Does anyone else want to share I'll take one more person who wants to share their customer profile. Alvina, you want to share yours?
All right, so I was thinking of like either like a high school athlete or maybe like a college athlete that's like trying to like build muscle because they're trying to like train for the Olympics. So they're trying to use the app to like hopefully the app can help them provide useful tips and tricks on like bodybuilding stuff like that.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, no, that's great. What age range do you think that could be?
I was thinking maybe like early 20s or around that, or like young adults.
Okay, and what about income status?
I would say probably like not really maybe middle income, since I feel like if they're high income, they would already have some sort of like personal trainer. So if it's like, so I feel like it should be targeted towards like low and middle income.
Perfect. Yeah, because I mean, people who are kind of more on the low income side, I'm not sure they would be wanting to. I'm not. Are you guys requesting access of my screen? Because I'm not gonna. I don't know. Anyways, yeah, that's great, because I would say that people who are kind of like lower income, they're not going to be as willing to kind of maybe apply for a gym or get a monthly membership, which could also affect their health, right? If they're not doing at-home workouts or they really don't have the time to work out, that could be a significant factor. So income standards, socioeconomic status, and things like that. So yeah, those are great two customer profiles, and you can continue to dig deeper in that as you research more on the internet, as you get statistics from maybe Qualtrics. There's lots of different websites you can look on to get user data, and I know user testing has some. You can just research a lot of different statistics about this. So that's great. So thank you so much for sharing. And let's get into more of UI design fundamentals. So just in general, design is not what it looks like and feels like. Design is how it works. So this is from Steve Jobs, the co-founder of Apple, who's probably one of the most successful and probably one of the most inspirational designers of our time period. I mean, just the way he thought about design and just things like he designed the iPhone, and basically what his theory was is he designed something so ambitious that the design team had to do it. And obviously that's not the best strategy, but he put a lot of pressure on them, but his vision was like something that's unparalleled. So Steve Jobs is one of the great inspirations for that. And one quote I also took out from one of my classes last year was, design is simply the rendering of intent. So whatever you intend the app to be, whatever you want the app to be, it's just basically what your thoughts are, what your emotions are, and kind of translating that into what the user wants. So it's a lot of things like that. And now that you guys defined a kind of customer profile, this is the second activity, which is going to be really fun, and you guys can take maybe 15 minutes for this. So let's see what time it is. It's about 3:23. Okay, take about 10 minutes for this. Trisha, yeah, I think you can just like kick that person out. Yeah, I don't know. That's kind of weird. Anyways, so one of the basic fundamental UI design practices that I can't stress enough is sketching. So it all starts with the sketch. And when you're designing a mobile application, before you even touch the program, you need to sketch things, because this will allow you to work out any kinks before you actually start diagramming, and it'll actually have a mental model as to what you're placing on the screen. And as someone stated, like, I'm not sure where to start, sketching is the perfect place to start, because I mean, you don't need to be the best artist to like do this. You can just create very basic wireframes. Like, for example, in the first one, we call that a storyboard, and that's essentially going just step by step in different screens, like a comic book. Yeah, exactly. It's like how you lay out a comic book. It's just going step by step as to exactly what the user is going to be encountering, what they want to do, what they'll accomplish after using your app, and what is kind of one scenario you want to model there. And the bottom one is a basic wireframe. Well, that's a little bit more complex, but it's just laying out on one single screen where different images are going, where the product name is going, where the descriptions are going, and where the menu items and such are. So you can use a whiteboard or large piece of paper to draw these components. If you have a notebook nearby, that will do. And when you're creating your wireframes, only lay out the important UI elements that you will implement. These are buttons, images, menus, text, and just basic things like that. Do not worry about color palette. Don't worry about interactions yet. Only lay out what your users will be clicking on, what they'll be seeing, and what are the most important things that will be on your screen. And walk through the screen as a user. Put yourself in the perspective of the user and ask, what would you look for? And does this feel right? So if you think a part of this looks wrong, for example, if a button's on the right side when it should be on the left side, you need to write that, you need to make a note of that. And this can only be done through like practicing user testing and getting in front of your users. But for now, you have to walk through your screens and kind of figure out whether or not this would be an ideal layout for a user. So now you can also draw arrows between the screens to diagram the UX. So for example, once a user clicks on a button, where are they going to be taken next? Are they going to be taken to the home screen? Are they going to be taken to a product screen? Will they be taken to a settings screen? Things like that. So it's all in control of you, but only make sure you're diagramming the important things. So you can do two different things. You can either do a storyboard type of concept, which is the first one, which I'm sure you guys are used to, but I want you guys to be practicing the second one, which is wireframing. So this image up from the left is actually one of the workshops I ran in my high school. And this is exactly what a wireframe is. It's just diagramming the basic layouts, kind of defining the audience first, and then the different wireframes. So to go step by step, you can start with the login screen, but things like the login screen and like settings and stuff, that's not important unless it's a key part of your functionality. Only draw out the functional parts of your app. So what is the main objective? What is the main goal your users want to accomplish? And only draw out those screens that will contribute to it. There's one quote that is basically saying, if you can take out a design element and it still holds the meaning of your app, then you can remove it. So for example, if I remove like a button, if I remove an image, if I remove text, and the app still holds like the true meaning, that wasn't a necessary design component. So you can remove that. So only include things that are necessary. And yes, exactly what Esther said. This is called low fidelity wireframes, low fidelity prototypes. Once you get into designing on XD, they're called high fidelity mockups, which is more moving closer towards the finished product. So this image on the right here is also what a wireframe looks like. So this right one here is actually probably the most accurate example of what you guys will be doing. So now that we've kind of talked a little bit about wireframes, using the same scenario, take about 10 minutes to draw basic wireframes. And since you only have 10 minutes, this only leaves time for you to draw the essential features. So take 10 minutes and draw out a basic wireframe of what you think this app will need and what it will look like for the user. So let's take 10 minutes and do that. But before we do that, does anyone have any questions? Awesome. Let's keep going then. And I will time 10 minutes. And if you have any questions, just feel free to message in the chat and I will help you out. But yeah, only remember to put key features here, diagram what screens are necessary in order to meet the scenario and the objectives the user wants to accomplish while taking into consideration your customer profile. And 10 minutes starts now. I will play some music. Would it be possible to have a wireframe key with basic elements? Like just what you should include, everything you should include in a wireframe? Is that what you're asking? I can quickly write that down actually. Oh yeah, sure thing. Let me just leave my email here. You can email me there. And you can also visit my website, which has my contact information. And yeah, I'm pretty responsive on those. So just let me know if you have any questions. But thank you so much for attending today's workshop. I really appreciate it. You don't have to know coding for this. Nope, I'm only teaching the design side of things. Coding will be a little bit more complex, which we'll get into HTML and CSS. So that's not for today's workshop, but I'm only teaching the front facing side of things, which is the design. And this design will be handed off to developers. So yeah, no coding for this. Yep. Yeah. So I'm going to be a sophomore in college. I'll actually be going to campus for the first time because I was online for the whole year. But I'm actually going to be majoring in engineering, perhaps engineering management. So since I'm kind of on the entrepreneurial side as well, engineering management combines both technical aspects as well as leadership and like business side of things. So that is going to be really helpful, especially in the future when you're going to startups, when you're working in a company. And let me just pause this real quick. And then I would suggest combining art with a technical degree, because this is just my theory. I personally learned design by myself, like just looking at YouTube videos and everything like that. and just graphic design in general, I learned like about 5 years ago, like 8th grade, middle school. I just started playing around with Photoshop, and since then things have been just I've been just experimenting with different things. So I don't think it's necessary to go to school unless you want to go to like a design school and learn about industrial design and really get into that type of field, animation especially. If you want to go to like Disney, Pixar, and that type of stuff, I would highly suggest going to a design school for that. But if you're trying to be like a product designer, or like UI designer, UX, and do more front end stuff, I don't necessarily think it's needed to go and get a design related major as your main focus. I would say pair that up with a technical degree and maybe get a minor in design, which I'm currently doing. So with a minor in design, I'm able to work on lots of design related projects and work with a lot of cool people, but still get the design knowledge while also getting my engineering degree. So if you're trying to do CS, definitely go for that as well. But I think that's a good combination. Thank you so much, I appreciate that. Yeah, I know it's a lot of information kind of condensed, but hopefully it is informative. So we have about 3-4 minutes left, so to do your wireframes. Also, we're gonna be quite a few people dropped off. I think they have to leave, but hopefully guys, you're not getting too bored. I know it's a lot of information, but yeah.
Actually, we think this is, the team was actually paying each other about this, but we think these are some really important life skills, and we're all very happy that you're here and that you're doing this workshop. I think everyone who is here has been, participating in the workshop so far. So
awesome. Yeah, I'm glad. Thank you guys so much for this.
Yeah, just wanted to reassure you.
Yeah. All right, we have about 2 minutes left. So finish up your wireframes and we will also do like 5 minutes of presentation. Or probably like 2-3 minutes, depending on how much time. You guys have drawn. All right, about 1 minute left. Classes, yes, that thank you. Yeah, I'm not sure I'm hosting personally any classes just because I will be going to college soon and also like focusing on startup stuff. So it'll be pretty difficult for that, but definitely in the future, I'll be hosting more of these workshops. So I'll let you guys know when I do that. But yeah, I love teaching this stuff. It's pretty exciting. So I did teach a few workshops at my high school. So by the way, I graduated from Tesla STEM High School for those of you who may have heard of it. All right, are most of you guys from like the Seattle area? I know a few people here went to RHS. Yeah, but I graduated from Tesla STEM, so yeah, taught a few workshops there for freshmen. Oh, nice. RHS, yes. I went there for 1 year and then transferred to STEM after. RHS is a great school. You work? Wow, that's awesome. I really wanted to visit New York this summer, but yeah. New York, nice. All right, we have about 10 seconds left, so make your finishing touches and then we shall share. All right, and time is up. Cool. Does anyone want to turn on their camera and share their wireframes? This is an important step, so. Yeah.
I will if
Yeah, sure.
okay. I have to be honest that I just got inside though, and I spent a minute on it, but this was the general idea. So I'm just gonna see if I can see my face and then switch
Yeah.
my camera. Okay. So generally speaking, this would just be where they would have suggestions, and then lower down would be like where they would have their health and data and like I guess some graphs to kind of show what was going on. And that was the
Yeah.
initial idea.
So like a dashboard type of thing.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Nice. I do like that. Yeah, graphs, as much visual content as you can put on there is great. Graphs especially help users visualize their data because if people like seeing images over numbers. So that's a great, yeah, I really like that so far. Yeah, so keep going. Does anyone else want to share their wireframes? Alvina, do you want to share? Oh, okay. What about Shreya? Oh, okay. Does anyone else want to share? All right. Well, we'll keep moving then. So we can skip that. So it's also important to define the type of user interface you're designing. For as I mentioned before, if you're designing a UI for like younger kids versus a UI for like tech savvy young adults. So this is just one example. For a younger audience, for example, as I mentioned before, you'd want to create a more simple layout. You'd want to use more larger text, bold text with sans serif fonts. So more of like a subtle cartoon style that's not too professional, but at the same time, it attracts the user in and it gets them engaged. You'd also want to use lots of images and fun illustrations because kids like images, they like fun things. So it's important to include those things in your app to get them to stay on your app. And you need to include lots of white space, not cramming too much information together. Also fun animations like in and out, swiping, zooms, those type of things will really attract kids. However, for a tech savvy adult, you'd want to use a more sophisticated approach. You'd want to kind of follow kind of the modern design trends. You'd want to have a simplistic layout as well, but include more like serif fonts. You can also include sans serif fonts. You have to vary your fonts between thin and bold. So understanding typography hierarchy and visual hierarchy. And you'd also want to include more realistic images as well as some illustration. So there's lots of illustration libraries out there like Undraw, for example, which is what a lot of designers do use for just like mocking up their application. But you need to really understand who you're designing your user interface for and who's actually using it. So nowadays kids have more access to iPads and things like that. So if they're using an app, like YouTube Kids, for example, they would need to have a different user interface compared to their normal YouTube. So just different differences like that. So tailoring your design to your audience. Now, if you guys have a notebook handy, which you guys do, I would suggest taking some notes on this because it is perhaps some of the key principles of UI design. So we talked a lot about the UX and how to understand your users, defining customer personas, and going into customer journey maps. Now we're talking more about the visual design side of things and more of the interface and what users are actually seeing. So one thing to a lot of things actually, you have to keep your interface simple. Avoid unnecessary items that don't need you don't need to add them. So whether that's like design elements like gradients, for example. I've seen a lot of people overuse gradients, and it's really not the move. You need to understand how gradients work, and highlighting them, for example, in headers or maybe particular shapes, but don't make your whole screen a gradient. Like, you need to understand where you're applying them, and just keeping the interface simple so it's a very clean experience. You need to be consistent in your UI elements. For example, if you're using rounded buttons, don't make your next screen have sharp rectangle buttons. You need to be consistent with that. If your containers which hold your text and images are rounded, don't go with the sharp container. You have to follow that same theme throughout, and users will actually catch this. They will know that the design team is not following a consistent design pattern, but you have to make sure that adheres to your brand as well as what you're trying to convey. You need to be purposeful in your page layout. You need to establish space between your different items, such as images and text, and not clump them together. You need to establish a structure. So for example, if you're on a mobile app, you need to have your header, you need to have you need to obviously have a dashboard. If you're creating an app like this, for example, you need to have a dashboard, a mobile navigation somewhere. You need to click that, which has access to all the buttons or even the icons below, which you can tap. You need to establish enough white space between things and not clutter your information. You also need to use effective typography to highlight important information. Now, one of the main things you can use here is Google Fonts. One second, Google Fonts. Google Fonts is a great tool to use when pairing up typography. So Google Fonts is basically, it's by Google, and there's a lot of font families on there. And you can even type up Google font pairings or font pairings, and you can kind of look at these different blogs and different websites that allow you to pair different text together. So it's always important to use at least 2 different fonts to differentiate between your header and subheading, and really get the user engaged, and also differentiate the different like hierarchy in your app, because you want your user to have a fun experience and not a boring experience. And also you want to highlight specific pieces of information and things that are, and maybe not convey things that are not as important. So using text basically is a key point to your app. Snapchat, again, is a great example of this, and how they highlight different aspects, for example, when you're in group chats and things like that. So just understanding typography as a whole and when to use large fonts and small fonts is very important. So larger fonts would be for title, smaller fonts would be for body text and subheadings. You also need to understand color theory and using appropriate colors to draw attention and appeal to emotion. So for example, for a health app, you would use more of blues, greens, and those type of things. You would use a lot of white, and those type of combinations really help engage the user. Green meaning more fresh, more healthy. Blue is kind of more energetic. It's also a little bit creative. So it's those type of colors that fit with color theory that really help attract the audience to your application. And you also need to understand and have the audience's goal in mind. What do they want to do and not what you want to do? So what are they trying to accomplish? And another app you can actually look at if you're designing this health app is MyFitnessPal. So I kind of derived this off of MyFitnessPal, so you guys can actually get inspiration from other apps that are in this. So I know a lot of these health apps are being made right now. But MyFitnessPal is one that I actually personally use. But it's a lot of, they've done a great job with their user interface. Are you talking about Instagram story posts?
Sorry, that was meant for Trisha. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're good.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah. So have the audience's goal in mind. What do they want, and that will help you kind of have set everything in place. Now, this is really an important slide here. When in doubt, explain it to the user explicitly. If they don't know they need to click a button, maybe include a hover over the button or a small question mark icon which they can tap on that shows them what exactly to do, or even write a small description below the button or below the image as to guide them. What a lot of companies do is they'd have an onboarding process. Before you even enter the app, they have a series of screens with illustrations that show the user how to use the application itself. And this allows the user to get situated with the application. So having an onboarding process and any type of indication as to where things go and what things should be clicked, you need to include those type of things. You should understand visual hierarchy. So this is something you should write down. Visual hierarchy, making elements more readable, scannable, relatable, and enjoyable. So these 3 visual hierarchy is what the user sees first, what the user sees second, and what they see third. So you have to figure out if you want a bold font to attract the attention and you want a separate header color there, you want a button to go to the next screen or move down, you have to figure that out yourself. And also taking into the audience's perspective into consideration. So visual hierarchy is an important concept. And while you're working, it's important to place your customer profile next to your design workspace. So as we created our customer profiles, we wrote a lot of stuff down about our demographics, geographics, etc. Have that handy right next to you, or even take an image of it and upload it to your artboard in Adobe XD. You can upload images there, as you saw in my workspace. I'm working with a lot of images on the left side, and then my artboard's on the right. So put your customer profile right next to your artboard space so you can actually see how your app is matching up with your customers. The important thing is, especially what I've learned early on, is I could spend up to 4 or 5 hours one day just on mockups. But then I realized that I'm spending too much time on the small details of things instead of looking at the big picture. There's so many of these functionalities to be made, but why am I spending so much time on picking a color or picking a button size? That should be something that's secondary. Instead, get your mockups to 80% and then focus on iterating after that. So that's an important concept. If you have about 20 screens to design for an application, get your mockups to about 80%. And then once you finish all the major functionalities, go again and start iterating on them and keep improving it. So improving your mockups is a constant process, and that'll help your designers and engineers to build a better product as well, because you've already gone through those iterations through using research and data. So that will help you the most. So don't spend too much time on the small details, and just keep going with your design. If you can remove an element and the meaning still remains, as I mentioned before, remove it. It's not necessary. And every typography has a personality. For example, if you're using Comic Sans everywhere, which I highly recommend not doing, that has a different personality compared to if you use Georgia text or Helvetica, for example. There's different meanings to what those texts are used for. And a lot of the major apps you see today, they've defined a specific font family for them. Airbnb has their own custom typeface, which they've created in-house, which is just next level. But they've created their own typography that really caters to their audience and kind of the vibe they're looking for and the audience they're looking for. So yeah, and in terms of talking about visual design techniques, you need to understand spacing, contrast, depth, weight, color, and proximity. So just write that down. I'm not going to explain each one of those because some of them are pretty self-explanatory, but you can research more about it. But visual design techniques are especially important when designing the interface of this. So understanding how to space out your elements, which colors to use as contrasting, the weight of your typography, and also proximity, which elements are next to each other. Another thing is defining your color palette. So oftentimes, if you're working at a company or a startup, if you're in charge, for example, at your startup, defining your color palette, you have to know, for example, if it's a health app, kind of using more greens and things like that. But if you're at a company like Amazon, for example, they have a standard brand guideline and their color palette already established. You need to use that color palette, the one they give you, and you need to ensure that there's enough contrast in it, there's enough flexibility. And if there's not enough flexibility, then you create tones that are more neutral. So as a designer, you have the ability to create new colors. I mean, you can get companies' colors, but you can also add on to it in order to make the design more applicable and make it look better. So refer to your color theory practices and also create colors that are brand appropriate. Use your existing brand guidelines. And for your images, if you want to use realistic images, there's a lot of open source sites out there, especially Unsplash. Unsplash is one of the best sites for free stock images. It's completely free. And in Adobe XD, you have the ability to install plugins, which is a little bit more complex, but it allows you to essentially import images straight from the app. But yeah, as someone mentioned in the yearbook, it's important to have continuity. For example, I remember, I was on the yearbook team as well, and it was really interesting to see how our previous year's yearbooks were, because some of them were just very inconsistent in terms of color, feel, and the patterns were different on every page. So as the time went on and as people kind of got the yearbook, we made it more continuous and kind of worked as a team to do that. So that was one example of how continuity is very important. And then when you're doing interaction design, so I know Esther here mentioned she's a little bit experienced in interaction design and things like that. But interaction is how the user feels and how the user is actually interacting with the application, the button clicks, the animations that go everywhere between one screen to the next, if whether it's a swipe, whether it's a fade, do they need to swipe somewhere in order to get to the next feature? I know, again, TikTok, for example, you can double tap to like it. You can also double tap on Instagram. You can click on a share button video. You can scroll to send to friends, things like that. Those are the minor interactions that need consideration. And usually people are divided into interaction designers and experience designers. So, but if you know both of them, it's really handy. So we have about 8 minutes here. I'm not too sure if we're going to get time to actually design it in XD, but I really wanted to cover the customer persona and wireframe drawing because you guys can use that to create your final product in XD outside of this workshop. So before we have about 8 minutes left, so I'm just going to talk about some do's and don'ts of UI. So based on all the principles I said before about spacing, typography, and things like that, as you can see here, this left image here does a great job of explaining that. So if you're a little bit familiar with web development like HTML, for example, you have tags called header 1, header 2, header 3, paragraph, those type of things. So those all come in handy, especially when you are designing an Adobe, like a wireframe and a mockup. So as you can see here, heading 1 is nice and bold with your body text below, and this helps the user differentiate what they look at first, what the section's about, and what the content is actually saying. There's also something called negative space, which is the space around the object. And it's the left and right, top and bottom. This is what is also called padding. And it's important to understand how much spacing is needed between different elements. Because, for example, if the tap through the cosmos and the space line was so close together, that wouldn't be as appealing as if it was spaced apart. So you need to understand that. And then the bottom here is a good image as to how to create a good color palette. You can create a series of colors and you can kind of experiment with those colors and see which fits best. But also when you're doing HTML and CSS, you can create a color palette like this and also use it throughout your website. But you also have to make sure you're not using too many colors, otherwise it'll be confusing for the user. So for button styles, this is especially important. This talks a little bit more about it. I'm sure you guys have encountered login screens like this before, like Instagram and things like that. But primary buttons, the buttons that are off focus, they need to be filled. So you have two different types of buttons. You have primary buttons and secondary buttons. So as you can see in the right image, the left image is a bad example. All of the buttons are the exact same style, and the user cannot differentiate as to what to click on first. So on the right side is the most common style of login pages. You have a login button, this establishes a hierarchy of what the user should click, and it's really easy to see. And then buttons can be rectangle, rounded, or underlined. I mean, it's not like a set in stone thing, but this is commonly what user interface designers work with. The attentions need to be focused on the selected button. So when a user clicks on the button, what happens next? If you're on a desktop, if you hover over the button, what happens? And you need to treat the user like they know nothing about your app. So what this means is you need to add error and hover states to alert the user. You need to tell the user if they've made a mistake in order to correct it. You need to tell the user what they're looking at if they don't understand what they're looking at. And this can be done through user testing. You create your wireframes and present in front of your audience. They'll give you feedback on this. So you need to make sure you're explaining everything very carefully. Different styles of forms, for example, the left to the right side, I've seen a lot, especially on the left side is what Amazon uses quite a bit. The right side, though, I think is a little bit better. You can see what step you're on, where you can see what's next and what they're currently at. So as I mentioned before, it's important to see the interaction and the experience as to what they're currently on and what they're about to see next. There's also just different layouts of icons and text, where the icons can go, where the text should go. It can either be placed on the right side. And an important thing to understand is you should never center justify your text. So I'm sure you've worked with like Microsoft Word and stuff before. When you're typing a document, all of your text is left justified. The reason for that is because people read from left to right. If you center align all your text, you have a big paragraph, your users will get confused on what to actually read. Same thing if you align your text from right to left, it's not going to work. You need to always align your text left to right, obviously depending on the context, but most of the times you'll see text aligned this way. This is just an example of text variation and hierarchy. As you can see on the right side, it's way easier to see the name of the person, the name of the song, and then the artist. Whereas on the left side, everything is just looks like one thing. So that's where the text hierarchy and visual hierarchy comes in. Again, another example of text variation. The right side is way more clear. And now we have about 3 minutes left for questions. But at this time, this is the time to basically experiment with the XD, play around with it, and turn your wireframes after you've finished drawing more screens, and basically turn that into a full-fledged mock-up like this. This is kind of like your, and I can actually show you guys a finished mobile application, which I have recently worked on, which will be cool to see. Give me 1 second, this one. But yeah, in the meantime, does anyone have any questions about anything we covered today? I know it was a lot of content, but I'm glad we got through it. Does anyone have any questions? All right, so for your wireframes, this is essentially, this started all as a sketch, but this was a kind of a produce app which I created, which allows user to buy imperfect produce that basically grocery stores throw away lots of food all the time, and you can actually buy this type of food which is still fresh. So this all started as a sketch, and then this is a mobile application that is eventually this. And as I mentioned before, as I mentioned before, you can get lots of UI kits to help you. So for example, like this timestamp here, as you see on an iPhone, all of these things to make the mockup more realistic. This is all provided on the Adobe XD website. So you can get an Apple design kit, and you can get all of these stuff. You can get all of these different elements on your screen. So yeah, so that's basically the end of the workshop. Does anyone have any questions before we end off today?
I think we had someone just join who was asking something about how to get into Adobe. I mean, I think you covered that pretty nicely during the workshop. So maybe you can send them your slides, or if you want to.
Yeah, I think they just joined the workshop, so that's why. You can go to the Adobe XD website, and there should be a download button, and then you can just create a free account for a free trial. If that doesn't work, you can also go to figma.com and download their program, which is free. Yeah, I used WordPress for my personal website, but for Ponder, for example, we used React.js and CSS.
So you guys coded the Ponder website.
Yep.
I see.
Yeah, from that took quite a long time, so lots of iterations, but yeah.
So I just wanted to say thank you so much for hosting this workshop. It was so informative, and we can tell that you're truly an expert at this. And we've looked at your work. All of us are just amazed by it. The NFL, the NBA, it's just so cool that you're doing all of this stuff at honestly such a young age. So it'll be exciting to see where you'll be in another 5 or 10 years. So
yeah, hopefully we have more designers come from here. It'll be awesome to see your guys' work as well. So yeah, I would love to keep in touch. So my email is here. I can send you my contact details and you can send that out. But if anyone has questions about anything related to like college, internships, getting into the design field, feel free to just email me and I can respond. For courses, I have to get the information for them, so I don't have that at the moment, but I will let you know.
Yeah, so for courses, you can send me if you find something, and then I'll relate it to them.
Yep, sounds great.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. Hopefully we can stay in touch, and hopefully you can attend some more seminars. They're pretty cool. And yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for attending. This was really great. But yeah, let me know if you have any questions, and yeah, thank you so much.